It began with an almost imperceptible quietness, so profoundly subtle that for a considerable stretch of time, scarcely a single soul within the wider public or even certain inner circles managed to perceive its unfolding. There was no grand palace announcement, no meticulously crafted press release issued to the waiting media, nor any formal photograph strategically released to news outlets. Instead, there was merely a gentle, almost imperceptible shift, a nuanced alteration in established routines, and a pivotal decision carefully deliberated and ultimately made behind firmly closed doors. This choice, conceived in hushed tones, was destined to send profound ripples throughout the entirety of the royal family, impacting its members in ways that very few individuals could have possibly foreseen or predicted at the outset. Prince William, a figure long recognized for his characteristically cautious approach to royal affairs and his unwavering, deep respect for centuries-old tradition, initiated a private move that those closest to the situation now describe as having been deeply personal, profoundly emotionally charged, and ultimately, a development that proved impossible for anyone to ignore. When the initial whispers and then the more concrete details of this significant action finally reached Prince Harry and Meghan, the reported reaction from their quarter was said to be nothing short of absolute shock and profound surprise. For a period spanning many years, the intricate relationship between the two brothers has been consistently characterized as strained, undeniably complicated, and frequently marked by prolonged silences rather than overt, dramatic confrontations. Following the pivotal moment when Prince Harry and Meghan made the momentous decision to step back from their senior royal duties and subsequently relocated to the sun-drenched climes of California, a vast ocean quite literally separated them, not only physically but also emotionally, from the remaining members of the royal family. Publicly, there were carefully worded statements expressing sentiments of love, understanding, and mutual well-wishing. Privately, however, numerous sources intimately connected to the family have consistently hinted at a persistent undercurrent of unresolved tensions, profound feelings of betrayal, and a deep-seated sense of loss that neither brother has yet been able to fully articulate or come to terms with. Against this complex and emotionally charged backdrop, Prince William's strategic move carried significantly more weight and profound implications than it might have initially appeared to possess on its surface. According to those intimately familiar with the intricate dynamics of the situation, this weighty decision was firmly rooted in Prince William's increasingly focused attention on his future, paramount role as king. As the incumbent Prince of Wales, he has been steadily stepping into a greater number of responsibilities, many of which were once shouldered by his father, King Charles. With this heightened responsibility comes an even sharper and more acute awareness of his enduring legacy. Prince William has always been consistently described as an individual who thinks with a long-term perspective, someone who meticulously measures the potential impact of his decisions not merely by how they will play out in the present day, but by how they will be perceived and judged many scores of years into the future. In recent months, this particular mindset appears to have intensified considerably. Friends close to the prince suggest that he has become notably more introspective, increasingly protective of his immediate family, his wife and children, and ever more determined to define a crystal-clear path forward for himself and the institution, even if that chosen path necessitates quietly, yet firmly, closing certain doors that once stood open. The move itself was profoundly symbolic in its very essence. Prince William made the deliberate choice to meticulously reorganize key aspects of his private life and to significantly streamline his inner circle, thereby redefining precisely who had access to him, who was entrusted with advising him on crucial matters, and who remained intimately connected to his personal affairs. This was not a matter concerning public titles or official patronages. Rather, it was fundamentally about the bedrock principle of trust. Longtime aides, some of whom had served for many years, were thoughtfully reassigned to different roles. A number of channels of communication that had traditionally linked the brothers and other family members were reportedly reduced or curtailed, and certain informal traditions that once served to connect the fraternal pair were consciously allowed to gently fade into obsolescence. To Prince William, this was not conceived as an act of aggression or malice, but rather a considered act of self-preservation. He firmly believed he was undertaking precisely what was necessary to protect his beloved wife, his cherished children, and, perhaps most crucially, the overarching stability of the venerable monarchy he will one day, upon a future occasion, be destined to lead. What imbued the entire situation with a particularly acute sensitivity was the profound emotional history shared between Prince William and Prince Harry. Growing up under the relentless glare of immense public attention, the two brothers relied heavily and profoundly on each other in the devastating aftermath of their mother's tragic death. That powerful bond, forged in the crucible of shared grief and sorrow, was once widely thought to be utterly unbreakable. However, the complexities of adulthood, the commitments of marriage, and vastly divergent visions of life's purpose gradually pulled them in increasingly opposite directions. Prince Harry's candid openness about his personal struggles, combined with Meghan's evident willingness to challenge established royal norms and traditions, collaboratively created a narrative that frequently placed Prince William in an inherently uncomfortable and often untenable position. He found himself perpetually balancing his deep-seated loyalty to his brother with his unwavering duty to the ancient institution, and over the course of time, that increasingly strenuous balancing act inevitably took a significant and palpable toll upon him. When Harry and Meghan reportedly became aware of William's profoundly personal and private decision, the information did not arrive through the warmth of a heartfelt telephone conversation or the intimacy of a personal written message, but rather through circuitous and indirect channels. This singular detail, in itself, eloquently conveys a significant narrative. Those privy to the inner workings of the situation insinuate that Harry experienced a profound sense of being blindsided, interpreting the strategic move as a deliberate and calculated act of distancing, rather than a mere neutral restructuring of operational responsibilities or personal boundaries. For Meghan, who has consistently expressed feeling excluded and fundamentally misunderstood by the intricate royal system, this particular incident served to powerfully reinforce her long-held conviction that the palace operates behind closed doors in manners that can often feel both emotionally cold and stubbornly unyielding. The shock that reverberated through them was not solely about the substance of the decision itself, but more profoundly about what it unequivocally symbolized: the conscious choice of one brother to forge a future path that, at least for the foreseeable period, appeared to leave no discernible space for genuine reconciliation. From William's deeply personal perspective, this weighty choice was, by all accounts, never intended to be punitive in its nature or consequence. Individuals closely acquainted with him steadfastly assert that he continues to harbor a deep and abiding affection for Harry. However, he has undeniably reached a pivotal juncture where the establishment of clear and unyielding emotional boundaries has become an absolute necessity. The relentless and often invasive media scrutiny, the public airing of deeply personal grievances that have repeatedly unfolded on the world stage, and the highly unpredictable impact of private revelations once they enter the public domain, have collectively rendered him profoundly wary. Each and every private conversation now carries the inherent and substantial risk of instantaneously morphing into widespread public discourse, and for a man meticulously preparing himself for the immense responsibilities of becoming king, that ever-present risk feels increasingly untenable and unsustainable. By quietly and deliberately reshaping the contours of his personal and professional world, William earnestly hoped to reclaim a vital sense of control and to restore a much-needed calm to his existence. Yet, it is an undeniable truth that silence possesses an extraordinary capacity to communicate with far greater intensity than spoken words. The conspicuous absence of any direct communication, the subtle yet discernible shifts meticulously observed by vigilant royal watchers, and the palpable and growing emotional distance between the brothers have all collectively fueled an intense and widespread speculation. Was this a temporary cessation of close interaction, a brief pause in a tumultuous relationship, or did it signify a permanent and irreversible alteration? Was William, perhaps, leaving the proverbial door slightly ajar, offering a glimmer of future hope, or was he gently yet firmly closing it, signaling a definitive end to a certain chapter? These profound questions continue to linger, hanging heavy in the air, remaining largely unanswered, and thereby significantly amplifying the pervasive sense of drama that envelopes the entire unfolding situation. What remains unequivocally clear is that this specific action has indelibly marked one significant turning point in the ongoing narrative. It unequivocally signals a distinct new phase in William's life, one where he now consciously prioritizes clarity and pragmatic understanding over the comforting pull of nostalgia, and steadfast stability over fleeting sentimentality. For Harry and Meghan, This serves as a stark and undeniable reminder that the venerable royal family, as an institution, continues its inexorable progression forward, irrespective of their direct involvement or participation. The profound shock they reportedly experienced was not merely about the feeling of being left out or excluded. It was about the deeply unsettling realization that the once robust and relied upon brotherly bond, a connection they had perhaps always taken for granted, may never, in fact, return to its former state of closeness and unwavering trust. As the world observes from an external vantage point, diligently interpreting every gesture and painstakingly reading between the lines of public appearances and carefully worded statements, the true, profound emotional weight of William's decision remains a burden known exclusively to those closest to him, within his most intimate circle. But one single thing is absolutely certain. This quiet, profoundly private move has fundamentally reshaped the intricate dynamic of one of the most closely watched and scrutinized families on the entire planet. And while its immediate implications may not have instantly commanded front-page headlines across every publication, its far-reaching impact is still very much in the process of unfolding, carrying with it deeply significant consequences that are destined to be acutely felt for many years to come. As the days incrementally passed, the emotional fallout stemming from William's singular decision began to manifest and take discernible shape in increasingly quieter, yet more profoundly revealing ways. There were no grand public statements issued, no dramatic rebuttals or impassioned defenses offered, but instead, subtle yet undeniable signs began to emerge, unequivocally indicating that something fundamental and irreversible had shifted within the intricate familial structure. Invitations that, in previous times, might have been readily extended with customary grace and expectation, simply never materialized. Messages that might once have been answered with promptness and personal attention were now met with carefully polite delays, or, more tellingly, were routed through a series of intermediaries, effectively creating layers of distance. To those observing from the outside, these seemingly minor details might easily appear insignificant or inconsequential. However, within the tightly knit royal circles, such nuanced shifts and deliberate alterations in protocol carry an enormous and deeply felt meaning. They constitute the very language of distance, a lexicon spoken with fluent precision by an institution meticulously built upon centuries of restraint, decorum, and unspoken understanding. For Harry, the dawning of this realization was profoundly unsettling and deeply disquieting. Despite the myriad events and conflicts that had transpired over the preceding years, there had always persisted an underlying assumption, perhaps even a deeply cherished hope, that the enduring ties of blood would, in the ultimate analysis, outweigh any temporary or even prolonged periods of conflict and disagreement. He had frequently articulated his fervent desire for reconciliation, openly speaking about his earnest wish for his own children to know and connect with their British family, and candidly expressing the profound pain of feeling perpetually cut off from his ancestral roots. Learning that William had taken such deliberate and calculated steps to redefine the very boundaries of his inner world and his immediate circle made those deeply held hopes feel incredibly fragile, almost on the verge of shattering. It strongly suggested that the ever-widening gap between them was no longer merely emotional in its nature, but had now become deeply structural, reinforced by a series of decisions meticulously designed to endure and to last for the foreseeable future. Meghan's response, as conveyed by individuals privy to the couple's innermost thoughts, was characterized by a profound and intricate complexity. On one hand, she experienced a palpable sense of validation, an affirmation of her long-held intuitions. From her unique perspective, William's decisive action appeared to unequivocally confirm her deepest suspicions, that the deeply entrenched royal system, with its ancient traditions and rigid protocols, inherently prioritizes an unyielding hierarchy and an absolute need for control, often at the expense of genuine empathy and transparent openness. Yet, simultaneously, on the other hand, a profound wave of disappointment washed over her. Despite the myriad and formidable challenges she had courageously confronted throughout her journey, Meghan had, at one time, dared to envision a future where, even amidst diverging paths and differing roles, a foundation of mutual respect could not only exist but flourish. The stark, quiet finality of William's deliberate actions, however, rendered that once cherished vision significantly more difficult, almost impossible, to steadfastly hold on to. Meanwhile, within the very heart of William's own private household, the prevailing atmosphere was one of carefully measured and cautious resolve. Catherine, universally recognized for her remarkable ability to seamlessly balance genuine warmth with impeccable discretion, was reportedly a staunch supporter of her husband's weighty choice. As a devoted mother, her foremost and unwavering concern had consistently been, and would always remain, the holistic well-being of her beloved children. The preceding several years had relentlessly exposed them to a greater degree of public tension and scrutiny than any parent would ever wish upon their offspring, and consequently, safeguarding their precious sense of normalcy had ascended to a position of paramount importance. For both William and Catherine, the intricate task of meticulously creating a stable, predictable, and reassuring environment unequivocally necessitated the minimization of any potential disruptions, even when those very disruptions originated from within the closest familial circles. This specific period also unmistakably marked a highly noticeable and significant shift in the manner in which William chose to approach his extensive public role. Astute observers of the royal family noted a newfound and unyielding firmness in his demeanor, a subtle yet utterly unmistakable gravitation toward a more pronounced and assertive authority. He appeared considerably more confident and unwavering in his resolve to establish clear boundaries, notably less inclined to offer extensive explanations for his decisions, and demonstrably more focused on the execution of ambitious, long-term initiatives rather than merely engaging in reactive, short-term gestures. It was almost as if the profoundly personal decision he had painstakingly made in private had, in fact, served to unlock within him a clearer, more defined, and more resolute sense of overarching purpose. By successfully resolving these deeply personal internal conflicts, he effectively freed up a considerable amount of emotional energy, allowing him to concentrate with singular intensity on the expansive future he so clearly envisions for the venerable institution of the monarchy. Yet, this newfound clarity, while undeniably potent, came at a substantial and deeply personal cost. The poignant loss of an easy, unburdened brotherly connection weighed heavily upon his spirit, even though William, with characteristic stoicism, rarely acknowledged such burdens publicly. Those individuals who truly know him well attest that he is by no means immune to the pangs of regret or the depths of sadness, but rather, he meticulously processes these profound emotions in the strictest privacy, far removed from the intrusive lenses of cameras and the speculative narratives of commentators. He possesses a deep and intrinsic understanding that the demanding mantle of leadership frequently necessitates profound sacrifices that often go entirely unseen by the public eye, and in his considered judgment, this particular sacrifice was undoubtedly one of them. The act of choosing the crown, even many years before the actual moment of wearing it, implicitly meant accepting the harsh reality that some deeply personal relationships might, regrettably, never fully heal. Across the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, Harry found himself grappling once more with a profoundly familiar sense of isolation. Life in California, with its sun-drenched landscapes, certainly offered him a treasured sense of personal freedom, abundant creative opportunities, and the comforting embrace of a supportive circle of friends. However, moments such as this one starkly underscored precisely how profoundly he had drifted from the intricate tapestry of his past. The initial shock of William's decisive move was not merely about the pain of exclusion. It was about the raw, undeniable confrontation with the stark reality where the possibility of genuine reconciliation was no longer a guaranteed prospect. For someone like Harry, who has spoken with such heartfelt candor and openness about the critical importance of mental health and the intrinsic value of human connection, this sobering realization cut deeply, piercing to the very core of his being. At the very same time, Harry and Meghan were acutely and painfully aware of the myriad ways in which any conceivable reaction from their side could be interpreted by the watchful public and the ever-present media. To respond with too much vigor or too strong an emotion, they understood, might inadvertently reinforce existing narratives of entrenched conflict and discord. Conversely, to remain entirely silent could easily be misconstrued as an act of passive acceptance or even indifference. This exceedingly delicate and precarious balance has, in fact, become a defining and ever-present feature of their complex post-royal life. Every single choice they make feels immeasurably weighted with consequence, every period of silence meticulously scrutinized and dissected. William's recent decision, therefore, added yet another intricate layer to this already considerable complexity, compelling them to fundamentally reassess precisely how, or indeed if, they would continue to engage with the royal family moving forward into an uncertain future. Behind the ancient, imposing palace walls, senior figures within the royal establishment reportedly viewed William's significant move as an utterly inevitable progression. From their seasoned perspective, the venerable institution of the monarchy thrives on absolute clarity and an unbroken continuity of purpose. Ambiguity, particularly when it involves highly visible and influential family members, intrinsically poses a substantial and unacceptable risk to the stability of the crown. By deliberately drawing firmer, more defined lines, William was widely perceived as actively strengthening the foundational pillars of the institution, rather than in any way weakening its fabric. There was a clear and unspoken understanding among these figures that considerable personal pain was undoubtedly involved in such a weighty decision, but there was also a deeply held belief that the annals of history would ultimately judge the decision kindly, especially if it succeeded in preserving essential stability during an undeniably turbulent and transformative era. The public's initial response, once the subtle murmurs of this unfolding situation began to permeate the wider consciousness, manifested itself in a predictably polarized manner. On one side, a significant portion of the populace extended their heartfelt sympathy towards Harry, perceiving him through the lens of a younger sibling unjustly marginalized and left to contend with a chilling detachment. Conversely, an equally vocal segment lauded William's decisive actions, commending his unwavering commitment to prioritizing his inherent duty and his profound dedication to safeguarding the long-term viability and integrity of the monarchy's future. Digital platforms, particularly the sprawling networks of social media, became a veritable hive of activity, pulsating with an array of speculative theories, deeply visceral emotional reactions, and fervent debates centered on the profound concepts of loyalty, personal responsibility, and the potential for forgiveness. Yet, amidst this considerable cacophony of voices and the relentless hum of public discourse, the central figures themselves maintained a striking and almost complete silence, thereby creating an expansive void that was swiftly filled by an ever-increasing tide of conjecture and widespread speculation. What lent this particular juncture an especially profound significance was its precise chronological placement within a broader narrative. At a time when the venerable institution of the monarchy found itself actively engaged in the delicate and often complex process of navigating a generational transition, simultaneously contending with the imperative of bolstering public trust and adapting to the constantly evolving expectations of modern society, every internal adjustment, no matter how subtly executed, inevitably assumed an amplified importance. William's deeply personal and private move, therefore, transcended the mere realm of familial dynamics. It served as a powerful, unequivocal signal of his readiness. This readiness encompassed his preparedness to assume the mantle of leadership, to make weighty and sometimes difficult decisions, and, crucially, to fully embrace and accept the far-reaching consequences that inevitably flow from those choices. In taking such a bold and definitive step, he effectively delineated a boundary, a foundational principle, that possesses the potential to profoundly define the character and direction of his future reign long before it officially commences. For Harry and Meghan, the trajectory of their future path continues to be shrouded in an undeniable degree of uncertainty. The initial wave of profound shock that accompanied these developments has, with the passage of time, gradually receded, giving way to a more somber and clarifying perspective. While they remain steadfastly committed to constructing a life meticulously defined by their own deeply held values, operating entirely independently of the traditional royal structures, poignant moments such as this invariably serve as stark and powerful reminders of the profound connections and established roles that have been irrevocably left behind. Whether the gentle erosion of time will ultimately succeed in softening William's resolute stance, or whether it will, conversely, contribute to an even deeper and more entrenched division between the brothers, remains a compelling question that only the unpredictable currents of the future possess the capacity to definitively answer. As the intricate tapestry of this story continues its gradual and deliberate unfolding, one singular truth emerges with crystal clarity. This was decidedly not a dramatic rupture born from a sudden surge of anger or the heat of an open confrontation. Instead, it represented a quiet, meticulously deliberate recalibration, a fundamental adjustment carried out with a palpable sense of precise intention and considerable self-restraint. And in a multitude of profound ways, this very characteristic renders the action even more potent and impactful. For sometimes the most truly shocking and transformative moves are not the loud, attention-demanding gestures that clamor for recognition, but rather the silent, understated ones that fundamentally alter everything without a single audible word ever needing to be spoken. Over the ensuing weeks and months, the considerable weight and far-reaching implications of William's decision gradually began to settle into what would become a new normal, a redefined reality that subtly but significantly reshaped expectations across all involved parties. What had initially struck many as profoundly shocking slowly but inexorably transformed into a steady, undeniable, and ultimately accepted reality. The conspicuous absence of any overt conflict or public discord surrounding the matter rendered it exceedingly difficult for anyone to openly challenge, and the notable lack of any explicit explanation or justification left precious little room for anything other than a quiet acceptance within the inner echelons of the royal family. Established routines adjusted themselves with remarkable fluidity. Scheduled events moved forward with an unperturbed rhythm. The venerable institution itself, in a testament to its enduring resilience, simply continued to do what it has historically done best. It adapted quietly, efficiently, and with an almost imperceptible grace to a distinctly new set of circumstances. For William, this particular phase ushered in a profound sense of internal alignment and resolute clarity. The private, yet pivotal, move he had undertaken was no longer merely perceived as a protective measure. It had organically evolved into a foundational principle, a bedrock upon which he would construct his entire approach to leadership, to his family responsibilities, and to his public life. He appeared increasingly comfortable with the insightful notion that not every unfolding story necessitates an immediate or public response, and that, similarly, not every fractured relationship can be salvaged through sheer effort alone. In the carefully defined parameters of his world, the imperative of responsibility now decidedly outweighed the pursuit of reconciliation, not because the bonds of affection had somehow vanished, but rather because he held a deep-seated conviction that the greater good, the overarching welfare of the institution, unequivocally demanded such clarity and firm boundaries. This deeply held belief profoundly shaped the entirety of his subsequent actions, meticulously defined his priorities, and rigorously informed the boundaries he steadfastly maintained. Catherine's indispensable role during this period became even more pronounced and significantly impactful. With an unwavering composure, she continued to project an aura of warmth and unwavering stability in her public appearances, offering a reassuring and steadfast presence that stood in stark and poignant contrast to the underlying currents of familial tension that simmered beneath the surface. Those individuals fortunate enough to be counted among her closest confidants often attest to her remarkable capacity to understand and empathize with both sides of the intricate divide, harboring genuine compassion for Harry while simultaneously standing with unshakable resolve firmly by her husband's side. Her unwavering focus remained steadfastly centered on cultivating a profound sense of unity and emotional security within the sanctuary of her own household, diligently shielding her children from the intricate emotional complexities and the intense public scrutiny that are an inherent part of being members of such a globally renowned family. In performing this vital role, she played an instrumental part in solidifying and safeguarding the very life and future that William was so determinedly striving to protect. For Harry, the intricate emotional journey he embarked upon during this time assumed a distinctly different and deeply personal shape. The initial jarring shock he experienced gradually evolved into a period of profound and introspective reflection, and that reflection, in turn, matured into a quieter, more profound form of acceptance. He has always carried within him a deep and abiding connection to his past, a tapestry of memories and experiences that defined his early life, and moments such as this undeniably forced him to confront the stark and often painful permanence of change. The realization that his beloved brother was resolutely moving forward, forging a future without him, was undoubtedly a source of profound emotional pain. However, it also served to clarify something of immense importance. His own future would not, and indeed could not, be defined by passive waiting or lingering hope for a different outcome. Instead, It would be actively shaped and meticulously crafted by the loving family he had purposefully created, and by the deeply cherished values he had consciously chosen to embrace and live by. Meghan, with her innate and profound perceptiveness for the subtle currents of human emotion, consistently championed a forward-looking perspective. While she undoubtedly experienced the sharp and unwelcome sting of exclusion, a feeling that could easily have lingered, she simultaneously possessed the keen insight to recognize the profound opportunity that such a situation presented. With the lessening of various emotional ties that might have otherwise pulled them back into familiar patterns, she and Harry found themselves unburdened, free to fully and completely invest their energies into charting their truly independent path. Their burgeoning projects, their dedicated advocacy work across a spectrum of causes, and their increasingly prominent public voices naturally became the authentic and powerful expressions of a life no longer bound or tethered to the often restrictive need for royal approval. Prince William's private move, undeniably painful and challenging as it may have been for all involved, ultimately served to solidify that separation, rendering it far less ambiguous and considerably more definitive in its implications. Yet, despite this clear delineation, the intricate story of their relationships did not conclude with an immediate sense of closure or a straightforward resolution. Instead, there were scattered moments, small and profoundly human in their nature, that continued to hint at a lingering, unspoken connection. These included a fleeting, shared glance exchanged across a crowded public event, a carefully chosen and subtly significant phrase embedded within a formal speech, or a respectful, quiet silence observed during particularly significant milestones in the lives of others. These gestures, subtle and often missed by the casual observer as they were, powerfully suggested that while clear and unyielding boundaries had indeed been meticulously drawn between them, the deep emotional resonance had not been entirely erased or forgotten. The enduring bond between the brothers, forged in the carefree days of childhood and subsequently tested by the immense pressures and complexities of adulthood, persisted in a state of profound complication rather than being completely and utterly severed. Public fascination with the evolving situation only intensified and grew more fervent as the years passed. A legion of commentators and self-proclaimed experts meticulously analyzed every nuance of body language, painstakingly dissected even the most minor statements, and tirelessly searched for the slightest signs of a potential thaw in relations or, conversely, evidence of further frost and estrangement. Each public appearance made by William or Harry was invariably viewed and interpreted through the inescapable lens of their intricate relationship, whether they themselves chose to acknowledge this pervasive narrative or not. Yet, both men seemed to grow increasingly determined to forge lives that extended beyond the confines of that singular, often reductive, story. William, for his part, focused with unwavering dedication on shaping a modern monarchy, one firmly rooted in the principles of unwavering service and steadfast stability. Harry, in parallel, concentrated his efforts on redefining his own life and purpose entirely outside the traditional confines and expectations of the royal institution. What endowed William's private decision with such a profound and lasting impact was not merely its immediate, initial effect, but rather its far-reaching and deeply significant long-term implications. It demonstrably set a clear precedent for the characteristic manner in which he approaches and handles conflict. Quietly, with decisive intent, and always with an astute eye fixed firmly upon the future rather than dwelling on the grievances of the past. This considered and deliberate approach may well come to define the very essence of his reign, signaling the emergence of a monarch who places a paramount value on structure and order over transient sentiment, and prioritizes unwavering clarity over any form of compromise that might dilute his vision. For some observers, this steadfastness will undoubtedly prove deeply reassuring, a beacon of predictability. For others, however, it may evoke a sense of detachment, feeling distant and perhaps even cold. But regardless of individual perception, this approach leaves little to no doubt about precisely where he stands on matters of principle and governance. For Harry and Meghan, the initial shock of William's move has, over time, become an integral and defining part of their unfolding story, marking another significant chapter in a journey already characterized by remarkably bold choices and often unexpected, far-reaching consequences. They have, through their experiences, come to understand with profound clarity that physical and emotional distance, can simultaneously bring forth both considerable pain and an exhilarating sense of freedom. They have also learned the complex truth that genuine closure does not always arrive hand in hand with a complete and satisfying understanding of events. Sometimes, it simply manifests as the quiet passage of time, as life relentlessly moves forward, compelling all involved to adapt. In that deeper sense, William's pivotal decision inadvertently forced everyone involved to embark upon a path of significant personal growth, whether they initially desired it or not. As the years continue to unfold and become history, this particular moment may ultimately be remembered not as a dramatic and sudden rupture, but rather as a quiet yet profoundly significant turning point. It was a juncture when individual paths diverged with clear intention and purpose, rather than through chaotic happenstance. It was a time when a future king consciously chose to meticulously define his world with unwavering precision, and a younger brother, in turn, accepted with a quiet dignity that his established place within that world had irrevocably changed. History often tends to cast its spotlight on grand public gestures and resounding declarations. Yet, it is often behind the scenes, in the silent, unassuming spaces of personal reflection and choice, that these private decisions truly shape the destinies of individuals and, by extension, the course of nations. In the final analysis, Prince William's private move accomplished far more than simply shocking Harry and Meghan. It served to irrevocably clarify a future that had, for an extended period, remained shrouded in uncertainty and ambiguity. It definitively closed some doors, while simultaneously opening entirely new ones, drawing clear and distinct lines that may, one day in the distant future, be softened by time or circumstance, but which will, without question, never be truly forgotten. And as the compelling royal story continues its complex and public unfolding, this quiet, personal choice will undoubtedly remain a powerful and enduring reminder that sometimes the most profound and far-reaching changes do not occur in front of 1,000 cameras, nor are they announced with fanfare, but rather they transpire in the silent, intimate spaces where personal duty and deeply human emotion inevitably collide.